The hooves of Mongolian horses once rendered the eastern grasslands barren, but around 300 years earlier, the Vikings had also stirred the western seas into chaos. This statement encapsulates the dominance of the Viking people, one of the most ferocious yet greatest warrior tribes in history. Their emergence ushered in an era spanning nearly 3 centuries, from 793 to 1066. In reality, the term Viking does not refer to all Nordic peoples. The origin of the word appeared in the 6th or 7th century in an ancient Anglo-Saxon poem. It carried the meaning of seafarers, pirates, and merchants. At that time, Europeans had already begun to recognize the Scandinavians as exceptional sailors and formidable sea warriors. The Vikings originated from the Scandinavian peninsula, which today includes Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. Initially, they were simple farmers who later leveraged their strengths to expand across vast territories from east to west, leaving their mark across Europe and creating a glorious Viking Age. As mentioned, the Vikings were initially engaged in farming and animal husbandry in Scandinavia. However, an event in 750 AD dramatically changed the course of their history. In a territory divided into over 30 smaller kingdoms, constant wars for power erupted. Amidst the hardship of war, a great catastrophe struck. A massive dust cloud spread across the atmosphere, caused by a comet or meteor impact combined with the eruption of at least one major volcano, blocking sunlight. This caused temperatures in the northern hemisphere to plummet, bringing prolonged cold and darkness, resulting in devastation across Scandinavia. This catastrophe was later reflected in Viking mythology as Ragnarok, the apocalypse. Ragnarok describes the sun turning black, symbolizing the dust cloud that enveloped the earth. Eventually, when the cloud dispersed, summer returned to the north, and a new generation of Vikings was born. Scandinavian society transitioned into a more brutal era. Perhaps because they endured such harsh conditions, the people of this region began transforming into warriors, venturing out to conquer abandoned lands. England was one of the first nations to catch the Vikings' attention, as it had monasteries filled with treasures. Additionally, Offa, king of Mercia, was the first English king to mint silver coins, a highly valued commodity for the Vikings. The Viking invasion began with their landing on the island of Lindisfarne, which became a springboard for their attacks and conquests in England. By 870, the Vikings had seized East Anglia, Mercia, and Northumbria, 3 of the 4 regions that later formed England. Only Wessex, ruled by King Athelred, remained. Eventually, King Athelred the Great repelled the Viking advance, leading to a compromise that divided England into 2 territories, each side holding half. These events are vividly portrayed in the TV series The Last Kingdom, featuring Uhtred of Bebbanburg, a Viking who devoted himself to serving England. He was also a real historical figure. England served as a foundation for the Vikings to extend their influence across neighboring territories. They raided monasteries along the western coast of Ireland and established permanent bases there. In the Mediterranean, they attacked regions of the Netherlands, Germany, and even advanced towards Paris. In 885, Sigfred, a Viking leader, demanded tribute from Charles II of France. When refused, Sigfred led 700 ships carrying over 30,000 men up the Seine River and besieged Paris for 11 months. The Viking Empire extended its reach into Russia, Ukraine, and engaged in battles across many countries in North Africa, the Middle East, and Jerusalem. During their era, they dominated and ravaged vast regions of Europe and its surrounding territories. To reach uncharted lands, conquer, and plunder spoils, the Vikings needed exceptional weapons and qualities. Their first and most important weapon was their ships, which carried them as far as the New World. With their seafaring expertise and the advent of sail technology in the 7th century, the Vikings crafted longships made from oak wood. These ships were designed with compartments containing large stones on either side to maintain balance during storms, combined with storage areas for weapons. One of the most advanced warships the Vikings ever used measured over 10 meters, with tall, sturdy sails to withstand the crashing waves. The upper hull sat very close to the waterline, allowing these ships to glide swiftly across the waves. Additionally, this design enabled them to navigate shallow waters, penetrating deep into enemy territories. With 200 ships, they could transport 5,000 troops, covering 150 nautical miles, approximately 280 kilometers, in a single day. This speed often prevented opponents from mobilizing their forces in time for defense. This advantage allowed the Vikings to expand their empire across Europe, a continent rich with coastlines. Thus, the Vikings sailed far and wide, fighting, plundering, occupying lands, and gathering spoils. In fertile or arable territories, they established new settlements. Do you think Christopher Columbus discovered America? Research suggests otherwise. Vikings are believed to have reached these lands 475 years before the famed explorer. Evidence from a settlement named L'Anse aux Meadows in Canada, along with traces of metal tools, something the native tribes had not yet developed, supports this theory. Historians believe these artifacts belonged to the Vikings. Ships were the tools that carried Viking ambitions across Europe, but to conquer all, they required the skills and bravery of the greatest warriors. Both Viking men and women learned to fight from a very young age. Their favored martial art, and the foundation of their combat skills, was called glyma. By the age of 6 or 7, Viking children were trained in glyma. This ensured the Vikings always had a strong warrior force during their peak era. Glyma emphasized strength, reflexes, and most importantly, decisiveness. Beyond combat, practicing glyma helped Vikings endure harsh weather conditions. Fighting was not just a necessity, but also a source of pride and purpose. They believed dying in battle would grant them entry to the sacred land of Valhalla, where they would enjoy fine mead, beautiful women, and ultimate glory. This faith fueled their determination on the battlefield, ensuring they never retreated. Vikings were so devoted to conflict that they waged wars among themselves when there were no external enemies. They fought for territory, wealth, or sometimes simply to avenge wounded pride. They also had an impressive ability to assimilate cultures, rivaling even the Chinese or Mongols. To this day, many Old Norse words remain embedded in the English language. The year 1066 marked the end of the glorious Viking Age. A Norwegian army led by King Harald Hardrada invaded England with a fleet of up to 300 warships. The decisive battle took place at Stamford Bridge, west of Yorkshire, England, where King Harold Godwinson's forces wiped out the Norwegian army from northern England. Afterward, both sides signed a peace treaty allowing the Norwegians to retreat, but they were forbidden from ever invading England again. This marked the beginning of the end of the Viking era. In the years that followed, the Vikings began to disappear from Greenland, a land that had once produced some of their greatest warriors. For a long time, no one could explain why the Vikings faded into obscurity by the 14th century. Later, scientists discovered that they had suffered from the effects of climate change. Research suggests that increasingly cold weather may have been the cause of their decline in the 14th and 15th centuries. Starting around the year 1100, temperatures dropped by approximately 4 degrees Celsius. Scientists reached this conclusion after studying ice samples taken from 2 large lakes in the region. The temperature drop shortened summers, lengthened freezing winters, and severely reduced the Vikings' ability to farm and raise livestock. The increased ice made their raiding expeditions less frequent, and trade activities came to a halt, leading to famine and decline. This explanation is considered the most widely accepted theory for the disappearance of the Vikings. However, could such a fierce and resilient people have vanished so easily for this reason alone? Why didn't they sail south to warmer regions of Europe to escape the cold? This remains an unanswered mystery. Perhaps the Viking Golden Age had simply run its course. As other nations learned how to defend themselves, expanding Viking settlements became increasingly difficult. Regardless of the cause, the Vikings' presence remains a significant milestone in human history. Their warrior spirit provokes a fascinating thought. If the Vikings had coexisted with the Mongols and the 2 most formidable armies of their time had clashed, which side would have emerged victorious?